Now we will be listening to a lecture from our keynote speaker for the night. Today we have Professor Kasondra McCracken. Professor McCracken is a lecturer at the Arizona State University College of Health Solutions, where one of her focuses is on the public health impacts of climate change, and she is involved with several major organizations within the environmental space. Please join me in emoji applauding Professor Kasondra McCracken. And before I pass it over, I just wanted to note that we will have a Q&A portion at the end of this speech. So feel free to send your messages in the chat and we'll give them to Professor McCracken after she's finished.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I am truly honored to be here. I am looking forward to hearing about your sustainability projects later on this evening. And again, I'm so sorry I'm not wearing green, but really excited to be here. All right, so do you remember the last time you sat by a river? Did you maybe take off your shoes, soak your feet in the cold water? Perhaps you noticed water striders in the water, felt the sand and the earth beneath you, listened to the sparrows above you. Just imagine, like, maybe this is your favorite place and your safe place. Now imagine that as you sit here, you see a young girl caught up in the river current and she is drowning. Now, of course, you rush in and you save her, only to realize that there are many others in the river drowning as well. After hours of rescue attempts, you start to wonder, why are there so many children in the water? You are exhausted from your rescue attempts, but you force yourself to walk upstream. You want to seek out the cause of this suffering and why this is happening. This story illustrates the public health approach, looking upstream to prevent injury and illness in the first place. We public health professionals, we seek to find the events and conditions that lead to human suffering and disease. But let me be clear, the work we do downstream is just as essential. We have to rescue people from the river. We must help those who are caught up in the currents of suffering. This is really where we are in the climate crisis. One eye is on the downstream, the other is on the source. Upstream is mitigation. We need to reduce our carbon emissions and stop the planet from warming. The science here is loud and clear. The more carbon we produce, the worse our suffering will be. We have to go upstream on the climate change issue, but we can't leave behind those who are already experiencing the effects of climate change, those who are experiencing hardship now, and those who will suffer in the future. Downstream, that's adaptation. Let's go move on to our next slide. So I'd like to share with you today what is happening downstream. We are already seeing these impacts today. This isn't something that's going to happen in the future. It will happen in the future, but we're seeing these today. And sometimes we lose sight of that. Each of these are predicted to worsen in a changing climate. As global temperatures increase, we will see additional cases of heat stress, heat stroke, and preterm birth. Even the smallest increases in temperature globally can result in increased illness and death. Extreme heat is also associated with poor air quality. They're linked. The combination of heat and poor air quality is a big threat to our children and to anyone who works or plays outdoors. Along with this, climate change will lead to longer pollen seasons, causing those of us to suffer from hay fever and asthma symptoms for months on end. As we have seen over the past few years, wildfires are being pushed outside of their normal cycles by climate change. The result of shorter winters and hotter temperatures means that the plants and soil are dry, leading to that increase in wildfire risk. This puts us at risk for respiratory and cardiovascular events due to the wildfire smoke exposure. Smoke from wildfires can also trigger asthma events and can even trigger preterm birth. And there are secondary effects as well. Low visibility from smoke can increase traffic accidents, actually, because of the low visibility. As we see more extreme weather events, such as hurricanes and flooding, we'll also see more waterborne diseases. Increases in waterborne diseases can happen due to heavy rainfall and to flooding, right? So what might happen is that water treatment plants could become overwhelmed, and there may be cross-contamination between sewage and drinking water. Sounds good, right? Warming ocean surface temperatures and altered rainfall patterns are leading to harmful algae blooms. These algae blooms produce toxins which contaminate our seafood. Let's talk a little bit more about food for a second. It's likely that a warming world will widen food and health disparities. As the earth warms, farm livestock will experience heat stress too. It's not just related to humans. Heat stress in animals can diminish their appetite, they just don't get hungry, and their physical activity, which could lead to lower growth and reproductive rates. This means lower production of meat, milk, and eggs. So perhaps we could see shortages in milk and eggs in the future, especially after extreme heat wave events. Moreover, increased carbon dioxide in our atmosphere is projected to lower nutritional quality in some crops. So wheat, for example, may have less protein, less zinc, and less iron. So like this is some things like so important in a business as usual carbon emissions scenario. We may be looking at a future that has less food, and the food that is available may be less nutritious. A couple more here. Climate change will impact diseases spread by mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas. As our climate changes, we'll likely see diseases in areas where we haven't before. Zika, dengue fever, West Nile virus, Lyme disease, and malaria. Those are some examples. Already, climate change has caused an expanded range of ticks. And milder winters mean that fewer ticks are dying off during our cold season, during our winter months. And what happens then is we can have this overpopulation of the tick population, which increases the risk of Lyme disease. In recent years, confirmed cases of Lyme disease have been reported in every single state. And fleas are reacting to climate change too. I saw some of you with puppies on here earlier. And we think about fleas for just affecting our cats and our dogs, but it impacts humans too. As global temperatures warm, we could see increased breeding rates and reproductive rates of fleas. And fleas actually can transmit the plague. So plague can be transmitted by one bite of an infected flea, and human plague has already been seen in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, California, Oregon, and Nevada. So during this time of COVID, we've all talked about like, this is such an unprecedented time. Like how many times have you heard that, right? It's like every day we hear this. You know, some people say this is a once in a lifetime event. I want you to consider that climate change will increase the odds of a future pandemic, more lives lost. For a variety of reasons, this could happen, but vectors is one that we're keeping an eye on since climate change will change their geographic region and breeding. So let's move on to the next slide. Climate change will influence human health in a variety of ways. Oh no, my font disappeared. That's okay. I'll just tell you what I was going to say. We often think of climate change as an environmental issue, but it isn't just that. We must change the narrative. It's a public health issue. It's a health equity issue. It's a humanitarian issue. It's a moral issue. We need to start making the connection between what is going on downstream with our health and what is happening upstream with our carbon emissions. Hopefully, by connecting climate change with personal health, we can ignite individuals and communities to take action. Let's move on to the next slide. This is my last one. What is exciting is that we collectively have the skills and the knowledge to solve climate change. We have people like you sitting here today. We have upstream hikers, we have river rescuers, and we need both. it really does give me hope to see you here today, and to see the actions that you are taking on innovative and sustainable solutions. And I just ask that you continue to learn about this, stay engaged on this issue, read books about climate change and health, lean in as much as you can, because we need you. We need you in this field. Um, Thank you so much for listening, but also thank you so much for your work in sustainability.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. It's a little weird when we can't hear all the roaring applause that I have zero doubts would be filling the auditorium that we would have had if we did not have COVID. But we wanted just to send a really big thank you, a big GreenLight thank you for joining us today. So now we have some time to go over some questions. If anyone wanted to type them in the chat, or if they wanted to unmute and ask the question they had. Is there anything people wanted to ask? We have one from Josh, our president of GreenLight. What book recommendations would you have maybe on this topic?
So this is going to sound a little weird. I love reading books, but I feel like sometimes it can be really overwhelming to sit down and read a big book, especially if you're a student in school. So I recommend blogs. I love blogs. They're short. You can read one a day. Eco America has some great blogs. Yale Climate Connection has some awesome blogs. And Yale Climate Connection actually has a great blog about books to read, which is nice. But anything by Katharine Hayhoe, I highly recommend. So I think sometimes it can be really overwhelming. We think, I want to learn about this issue. I need to like grab a textbook or sit down and read, 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, pop open, read a credible blog, and it's going to really put you in a good place. It's a good question.
Thank you. That was a great answer. So we have from Mia, what do you think are the most pressing issues that we should tackle first?
In health and climate specifically, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah, and climate change in relation to.
Gosh, it's so hard because they are so interconnected, and you start to have these domino effects, right? Where it's food insecurity, it affects everything. And so to untangle one piece and to say that this piece is the most pressing and important is very, very hard. I personally love the vector-borne diseases. That's my bread and butter. But I think for me, looking at our future food security is very concerning, because those who are going to be most affected by a changing climate are those who are already vulnerable, right? So we really need to think about our children and those who have a lack of resources, and what the future is going to hold for them if our food is no longer available, we can't access it, it's more expensive, and it's also less nutritious.
All right, we have time for one last question. So what would you say are some action steps that anyone can take right now where we are that you think would contribute even in one small way to improving our climate situation?
I think the most important thing you can do is talk to people about it. And hopefully you're already doing that, like over the Thanksgiving table, call up grandma on the phone. But I think that when we talk about climate change, we have to connect on values. Everyone already has the values that they need to address climate change. Connect with the people in your network about those values and make the link for them that it's not just in the environmental issue, it's a health issue as well, and that's a humanitarian issue. And so if you care about justice and equity, you have to care about climate. My famous thing I always love to say is, if you care about health, you have to care about climate change, because they're so connected. So hopefully that answers some of your questions, but feel free, you can always text me on LinkedIn or track me down by email. I'd love to connect with you after this, and thank you so much for your questions and your engagement today.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and answering our questions, Professor McCracken. If you do have more questions, we'll include all of the contacts in the follow-up emails that you'll receive after the showcase. Thank you so much.